The 90s may be seen by a lot of people as the last great decade for country music, but it wasn't a great sound of music that came to Nashville overnight. Many years artists paid their dues in the decades before the 90s, and the artists from the past decade would lay the groundwork for the sound to come. With country music losing its edge in the early 80s, many felt that pop country was the future of the country sound. As we look at each year from the 80s to the end of the 1990s, we find that pop country was a dividing influence on the sound of the 90s, as well as the raw country sounds of the past. The artists that grew up in the pop country era would take sounds, mixing it with old style country for a new neo-pop country that was true to its roots and made a lasting impression for years to come.
It's called She's Not Your Baby Anymore. She's not your baby anymore. Don't you know that gal is mine? Well, I treat her right and love her so, and I'm gonna keep her, don't you know?
1988 started off with the new talent of Ricky Van Shelton climbing the charts. Ricky had already had a few hits in 1987. Someone Lied, Life Turned Her That Way have both hit number one. In 1988, he would score 4 more number one singles. Don't We All Have the Right and I'll Leave This World Loving You both came from his debut album, Wild Dreams. While the single From a Jack to a King will be the lead-off single of his new 1988 album, Loving Proof.
From a jack to a king, with no regrets, I stacked the cards last night. And Lady Love played her hand just right to make you king of my heart.
His father was a local gospel music singer, and Ricky loved his father singing and would pick up singing gospel music also. As he got older, he was turned on to pop music and started to sing those songs also. It wasn't until his teens that he fell in love with country music. Him and his brother would start up a band and perform around town. In 1984, Ricky's girlfriend Betty would find a job in Nashville, and Ricky would go along with her in hopes to start his music career. He found some work in Nashville clubs and would record demo tapes to pass around. One of those demo tapes was heard by a newspaper columnist who arranged a meeting with Ricky and Columbia Records. This would lead to his first album, Wide Eyed Dreams, in 1987. The first single was a title track that hit number 24 on the charts. The second single would have more success. Crime of Passion would hit number 7. After that came his first number 1 and a huge boost to his career. Somebody Lied would hit number 1 in December of 1987, and this would also help the album get to the number 1 spot.
Could it be somebody lied?
In just a short time in Nashville, Ricky Van Shelton became one of the most successful country singers of the year. In the summer of 1988, his second album, Loving Proof, would be released and rocket to number 1. Not only was Ricky seeing huge sales, he was also picking up major awards. Somebody Lied would be nominated for Song of the Year, and he would win the CMA's 1988 Horizon Award.
Well, they told me to make it quick, and I'll tell you what, I'm gonna be quick and get out here and look at this thing. I want to thank everybody at the Academy, all the fans, all the radio people, Mom and Daddy, and just anybody else that deserves it, CBS.
In 1988, CMAs would add a new category called Vocal Group of the Year, and that would be handed out to any musical act with 2 or more singers. The first ones nominated for this new award was Alabama, the Forster Sisters, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, Restless Heart, and the winner of the award, Highway 101.
And our producer, Paul Worley,
yes.
and great guys, and all the folks at Warner's, and everybody that made this possible. It's
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you, guys.
Highway 101 was a band founded in 1986 in Los Angeles. The band was led by Pauline Carson, who had already had a few songs on the country music charts, but none would break into the top 50. The band signed with Warner Brothers in 1988, and their first single, Some Find Love, would fail to make any real impact on the charts, and the band would demand Warner Brothers pull it from a release, feeling it was too country pop, a sound they didn't want to put out. At this time, the neo-traditional country music sound was in full swing, and the band knew it. Their second single would be a more traditional country tune called Whiskey If You Were a Woman, and it would reach number 2 on the country charts.
Oh, whiskey, if you were a woman, I'd fight you and I'd win, Lord knows I would.
Their second single, Somewhere Tonight with Top Daddy, hit number 1, with Cry, 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 their following single, also hitting number 1.
Just a little creek now, but when the rain comes down, it's gonna be a raging river. I just heard my baby say goodbye.
I've got a tiger by the tail, it's plain to see. I won't be much when you get through with me.
One of the biggest comebacks in 1988 was a singer that hadn't had a top 20 hit since 1974. Buck Owens was no stranger to country music fans. The younger fans had grown up watching Buck Owens co-host Hee Haw until 1986. In the late 60s and early 70s, Buck Owens was at the top of his career with hit after hit, from songs like Act Naturally, Love's Gonna Live Here, and I've Got a Tiger by the Tail. Buck was one of the leading voices in the Bakersfield sound, a subgenre of country that started to emerge in the late 50s, giving country music a more rock and roll honky-tonk sound. Other than Buck Owens, one of the biggest stars of this sound was Merle Haggard. However, just because the two of them had the same taste in music, and even the same taste of women, that didn't mean they liked each other. After all, Merle Haggard would end up raising Buck Owens' kids when he married Buck's ex-wife.
I mean, did you guys socialize? I know you did your publishing through him at one
I
point.
didn't like
something,
him.
Oh, really?
He was married to at the time I was married to
Right.
a lady that was married to him before.
Sure.
And I had his children.
Oh, that's right.
And
That sounds a little tricky.
it was easy to get crossways, with that going on. But we managed to keep our professional life separated, and I always admired his music.
Buck's music career would take a nosedive when his best friend and bandmate Don Rich was killed in a car wreck in 1974. To Buck, playing music without Don Rich just wasn't the same or as fun.
And when you're tired of fooling around with 2 or 3, come on home and fool around with me.
Buck Owens would release music after this, but none had any real impact, and he became mostly well known as the face of Hee Haw. In 1988, he would team up with one of the biggest new talents in country music, Dwight Yoakam.
You don't know me, but you don't like me. Say you care, that's how I feel. But how many of you that sit and judge me ever walk the streets of Bakersfield?
Dwight, a big fan of Buck Owens, was putting the Bakersfield sound back on country music radio. The two would team up for a cover of one of Buck Owens' songs called Streets of Bakersfield. This would lead to Buck Owens' first number 1 since 1971 and Dwight's first number 1 ever.
If you and your baby have they fallen out, call me up, sweet mama. We'll go stepping out and we go honky tonkin'. Hey, good looking, we'll go honky tonkin'. What you got cooking, we'll go honky tonkin' round your town.
Hank Williams Jr. was continuing his winning streak by winning the CMA Entertainer of the Year for the second year in a row. He would also pick up the CMA Award for Best Album of the Year, Born to Boogie. One of the most unique artists to come out of 1988 was Canadian singer-songwriter Katie Lane, who brought her cowpunk music to the mainstream. In 1988, she would team up with rock and roll legend Roy Orbison for a cover of his song, Crying. This song would win them both a Grammy for Best Country Collaboration, and the song would be heard in the 1987 John Cryer film, Hiding Out. In 1988, she would win the Canadian Country Music Association's Entertainer of the Year and take that award home again for the next 3 years in a row. Randy Travis would be dominating most of the album charts of 1988, with his 1987 album Always and Forever hitting number 1 18 times, and his 1988 album Old 8x10 would continue that success by debuting at number 1 and staying there for 8 weeks. Reba McEntire would share a lot of the number 1 spots on the album charts with Randy Travis. Her 1988 album, Reba, would stay at the top of the charts for 8 weeks, with the two singles, I Know How He Feels and New Fool and Old Game both hitting number 1.
That I'm a new fool and an old game.
Patti Love's had been trying since she signed a record deal with the MCA to break into the charts, but only a little success would come until 1988. She would get her first top 10 with If My Heart Had Windows, and the following single, A Little Bit of Love, hit number 2. This would also help her land a CMA nomination for Horizon Award in 1988.
I can't concentrate, and I pride myself on keeping my cool. But I've got to admit that I'm a little bit in love with you. Delta Dawn, what's that flower you have on? Could it be a faded rose from days gone by? And did I hear you say he was a-meeting you here today to take you to his mansion in the sky?
Tanya Tucker started out her career in country music at the age of 13 when she had her first hit with Delta Dawn. A handful of other hits would follow, but sadly by the late 70s it seemed her career was fading out. By 1978 most of her singles wouldn't even hit the top 100, and those that did couldn't even break into the top 40. But Tanya wasn't one to give up. She would keep releasing singles and albums throughout the 80s. And by 1986, with the change in country music swinging back to a more traditional sound, Tanya was able to score her first top 10 single since 1982 with a number 3 hit, One Love at a Time. This will start off a string of top 10 hits for Tanya. In 1988, she will land 2 back-to-back number 1s with If It Don't Come Easy and Strong Enough to Bend, and her final 1988 single, Highway Robbery, would hit number 2. As 1988 came to a close, country music was seeing huge sales unlike anything it had seen before. New artists would bring in a new younger fan base who's turning up to buy the albums at an unprecedented rate. Sadly, 1989 would bring tragedy to the country music fans, as one of his most brightest stars would pass away at his home.
He's a real good guy. I know all of his friends and songwriters are going to miss him. I worked with him a couple of weeks ago, and we were making plans to do his Memorial Day show in his hometown. I tell you, I'm so sorry.